Right, welcome everyone at the next multi-network community sync. Today is March 12th, and I see we have Lionel, you have a topic, so take it away.
Yes, thanks. So I sent an email to SIG Network and SIG Multicluster about having a generic endpoint slice reconciler repository that will be a bit similar to the Kubernetes endpoint slice, but that would be generic and can be used for multi-network. It could be reused for this gateway API endpoint selector, also for some multi-cluster things and even more things, I believe. But I don't know if you saw the answers. I don't think people upset this for now because of the amount of repository that there is behind Kubernetes 6. And since my primary use case is for this work and also for probably Multus, I guess at some point or at the beginning, I would like to know if we could have it for now in Kubernetes 6 / multi-network. So yeah, we need the endpoint size control at some point. I don't know if it's good to have it already or what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, that was at least, to be honest with you, that was always my take on this. Since we are going to have a controller here for the other object, I was thinking to have a endpoint slice controller, but since you were driving the other effort, then okay, we can do that as well. I didn't mind. It can be either. And I see, yeah, their point is, I see their point there. What? I just saw the email. Sorry, I haven't just skimmed through it. But from the gist of it, I think one problem I would have, because you propose to have the controller to support multiple various implementation, which I don't think I would like that. At least not in this project. If we are in here, then we support pod network and of course the means to do it. So hopefully in the future we can get and synchronize with the endpoint selector that Pooja is driving on the other one, but I think this is where I would draw the line. I saw you calling out some reading on the annotations from Multus and some other approaches, which I don't think should belong here. It's multi-network, so I would want it to be focused on that approach. I'm not sure how that would work even on the, if you were to create a global repo, because then you have to have a separate implementation per each of those kind of implementations, right?
Yes, and
This is
this is the
where,
point: is that
yeah, go ahead.
the reconciler part is only the part that is generic. The rest is the implementation of the controller that has to do it for you. So
So
this
what is
reconciler,
the, uh-huh.
the reconciler ensure that the pods that are added are not impacting all the endpoint slices that you have created. It will I don't know exactly how to explain, but you can have 10 endpoint slices, and you want to limit the amount of endpoint slice that you modify when an endpoint is added or removed or updated.
That's fair, yeah. And you add it because
And,
it's bundling the endpoint slices. Yes, it splits
and
the total.
this is this logic that should be generic, and the rest is of course led to the implementation. So how
And
to
this
get
is
the IPs,
where
etc.
I don't fully agree with you on that, because the point of having pod network and then having the gateway API is to ensure we are generic. I think that's the goal of this whole effort, so that we don't have to create every single piece for each implementation. That's the point. The only piece that your implementation has to worry is to update the resource claim status. That's it. Because resource claim status, the network that you added, is generic, is core. And then basically we just ask everyone to populate that field over there for each of your interfaces, and the rest will be taken care of. That's why where I don't fully, I don't think that's the case. Let me know, because let's assume we have the pod network. Let's assume everything is there.
Mhm.
What sort of and we reuse the resource claim in status. So we have all the pieces in place.
Yes.
What sort of customization you would want to have on the endpoint slice controller?
So you need to separate the part that I said about reconciling the 10 endpoint slices and
Mhm.
separate it from the way you select the pods, because these two parts currently are merged together in the current code. You want to extract the service selector from this code so you can use this endpoint selector from a gateway API, or you can use whatever you want.
No. So this is where I would. So there was even talks to make the endpoint selector core object. I know that right now there is discussion on putting it into gateway API repo as part of that. But there was a discussion of making a core. But before I continue, Doug, you have a hand here for some time. Go ahead.
Well, couldn't the implementation agnostic part of what Lionel is talking about live here so that we could have a common library for the generic endpoint slices and then have it so it could be implemented, for example, in another repository within this group, or say another repository in network plumbing working group, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is something that community is interested in as well. Right? Like, I understand that, you don't necessarily want an implementation of net attached F stuff in your repository location. So I'm fine with that, but I mean, this could be generally useful. Oven Kubernetes has some stuff that may actually benefit as well because they've had to make their own generic endpoint slice controller. Well, generic, not so generic, like specific to their own case, but potentially they could also make use of it too. So, I mean,
Uh, what would that look like, Doug? Because this is where I'm seeing the
I
gap,
thought
right?
that's what I heard Lionel saying is that there's some commonalities between these that could be centralized in one generic
So
endpoint slice
okay,
controller.
now because I would like to know more details, and Lionel, maybe you can so hand waving, and let's assume we do that. I would just want to see how far we can take it, and how I'm seeing it. So we would have a controller that's responds to a what. So that's the first. So it watches what sort of objects it will watch, right? And this is straight away at this point. This is the first thing that that I think now it will be already custom, because in our case we have to watch resource claim, we have to watch endpoint slice, we have to watch a route from gateway API if we are to do that, right? At least I'm talking about what if we say we adapt the gateway API approach that Pooja proposing, and then dealing with this. So basically, we watch, as I said, pod, endpoint slice, route, and resource claim, right? So we watch all those items, right? And based on those, we create endpoint slice for a specific pod network, right? And the name of the pod network is in resource claim, luckily, hopefully somewhere there, right? So we don't have to watch the template or the pod network even. All right, so that would be, for example, for the multi-network approach. How would you see, and you see this has to be a watches on the controller. We probably could make that somehow pluggable with controller runtime somewhere. This setup with manager can be different per implementations, but this is kind of core of the whole implementation, I would say. So where would be where would be the pluggability, right? Because right now, and based on those objects, right, the logic in the reconciler would have to go, or maybe yeah, you're right. Maybe we can then do some pluggable things where, okay, go fetch me pods, and that function is then kind of abstracted, right? And we have our own implementation, and you can add our other ones. So this is what I'm trying to kind of find how we make it pluggable, right? Or do you say we just make it a library? Yeah, go ahead, Lionel.
Can you open the link that I sent? It's this
Yeah.
endpoint slice controller. I put an example there in the README.
Oh, exactly. That's what that's perfect. Share this stuff.
So yeah, if you scroll down, this is example usage of this endpoint slice reconciler. So the parts that has to be done for every implementation is this one with the desired endpoint slice by address type port. So this one will you need to give the service and all the pods that the service is selecting, and then the reconcile function should work for the one that is below, should work for every endpoint slice controller. It's the same logic behind. It's the one that minimize the number of endpoint slices that you modify when you add or remove an endpoint in your endpoint slice.
But keep in mind the desired endpoint it has to be triggered based on some things.
Yeah, but this is implementation specific. This
and
is
that's
not
my
part
problem,
of the
right?
command.
Because
Yeah,
how
but
do
this
you
is not
pass
part
that
of what I
information?
want to push. It's not part of what I want to push. I want to push only the part that reconciles the things, because it's complex logic, I think.
So this is where you can even see here, right? It gets kind of out of hand at one point, because it might get, I think, endpoint slice has as well ports, so you have to have port and target. I don't know whether you need to have, no, you need the target port. You don't need the front end port. You need the target port, kind of analogy of is in service. So what is the endpoints backend ports that I'm gonna target the traffic towards? So you need that information as well from somewhere. And now then you have to, at the end, you have to watch a specific object. And are we all saying we're gonna use what's gonna be the service? Is service is going to are you thinking of just at the first phase just using the service object with some annotation saying, okay, this is going to be for this? Is that what is the initial implementation until, let's say, the Fuja stuff is out?
I'm not
Services.
exactly sure if I. Sorry,
Go ahead, Doug.
I was just assuming, but yeah, this is for endpoint slices. They're for services, right? Because you can directly integrate with service now. And yeah, having everything in under Gateway API is awesome and future looking. I think that's great. However, I do think that there is a assumption from your everyday users. I just want to launch a pod and have a network on it, that you'd be able to put a service on it, right? And that's the way that people think about it. So for me, this is a good way to get adoption from users, to be like, oh, hey, yeah, here's a thing that you take for granted
On
that
that
you
note,
use.
not exactly, because if you're gonna start with supporting the service object, nobody gonna switch to Gateway API. Considering, I'm not sure any one of you following the comments over there where people are pushing back on, oh, I have one object and now you want me to create 8 for the same thing. Keep in mind, that's what it ends up like. If you LB type service, you have to create around 8 objects or so with Gateway API. So adoption would be only if we really push for the Gateway API. Otherwise, if you make workarounds to support service, that kind of counters that. Because I
mean, well, here's the
you see
thing.
that,
I don't
right?
want to push down a user's throat that you have to make 8 objects. Like, this
And
is
that's
certainly some of the stuff that
no,
makes life worse. And I mean, we already are treading in dangerous water with DRA. Like, we have to find the right level of abstraction here, because
right.
if people think CNI is confusing today, wait till you get a whiff of DRA. Because
that's fair, and that's why I think in here in this effort, at least the default approach, the more opinionated, I want to hide the array completely from the user. I don't want to expose the array for the, and keep in mind, when I mean user, I mean the front end user.
Yes, totally. We're on the same page there, right?
So I know, when you say user, I hope you don't mean the implementers or us, Lionel or Hugh.
So I meant, like I said in my example, like your everyday user who just
Okay, yeah,
wants to launch a
exactly.
pod and get
So-
a network, right?
So you see my point of hiding the array completely out of the picture, right? Because as you
Yes,
said,
totally. But
it's-
yeah, I was
there's-
really using that as an example with like, oh hey, like we have like other stuff
I
like
see.
this. Like
I
you
see
have
what
to
you're saying.
create
Okay, that's a
native
fair
objects.
point. Yes, I agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
But I think it's double-edged, right? Because the other counter argument is service today. What you do when you do load balancer, you get all cluster IP and node port. With gateway API, you might want to just get one. You don't always need cluster IP, right? Or node port. You just maybe sometimes you just need load balancer. I'm sure your use cases, but we see internally such use cases where I just want LB. Cluster IP is just a waste of IP for us, and node port is just a waste of a node port. So it sometimes even hinders, right? But sometimes it's the other way, where we want to have cluster IP only. But that's the kind of, you can do it with service. What I'm getting at is, you see the problem, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't, but kind of trying to I see what you're saying, that push this approach down the throat of users. But I think this is where we would like to move towards, rather than build on top of service. Especially if you if you propose that somewhere and it gets to
Because somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Like the idea of an endpoint slicer inherently, endpoint slice controller, like Lionel was talking about, inherently is tied to services, right? Endpoint slices are tied to services unless you make a re-implementation using them, right? So services involved one way or another.
It doesn't exactly has to be service, right? It's a endpoint slice to a single point that represents that front end, let's say, right? In this front end is a service today. That front end can be a gateway API, same way. But at the end, endpoint slice, keep in mind the front end piece is done through a label. Let's be aware of that one, right? It's not, there is not even a endpoint slice doesn't even have a field called service or something. It's just a label in the metadata section, right? The rest is just grouping of endpoints with target port for them. That's it. And then basically who owns, who basically reference to that endpoint in terms of pod or what's not. The only thing
correct. That's correct. And with this reconciler, it's not necessarily have to be a service. It can be an endpoint. It can be an endpoint selector.
And that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
But then my problem then with that approach is, where in your code we change the watchers, because now I have to watch different things depending on the implementation.
It's not part of this code. It depends on the implementation, but the reconciler part is the same thing. The one
not exactly, because no, it's not, because if I reconcile based on service, I have to know the structure of the service, and then you have to pass that object into even your desired endpoint by endpoint. This, I don't see, what does this get? This is not true list. This is not the true list, right? Because in my case, I want to use gateway API, for example. So I am gonna I need to pass pods, endpoint selector, and
this is not generic.
Route. Okay.
This line is not generic. The only thing that is generic is the reconcile function below.
The reconcile function below.
This big thing, yeah.
So what does this do? Oh, desired. So basically, as an input, you provide, but then service already is not a go, as I already said.
No, but here it's it's not have to be a service. It's this field. If you check the function definition, is a runtime object or something like that. I think.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Based
There's
on okay.
there's nothing nothing related to service in this reconcile function.
Mm, mm. But still, so what about watches? How do you define those outside of this? Because then you see the
I mean,
problem,
this
right?
is yeah, I understand, but this is on each implementation. I just want to I want to give a library that allows us to reconcile, not that does the full thing. Because
So
as you said, the full thing is
and
not
that's the
necessary.
difference on what I'm thinking, right? I see what you're getting at, folks. But we are putting things into multi-network, and here we are trying to define the pod network, and then in the future align it with the other items, right? If we are going to put something here that's completely unrelated to this, then yeah, you know, just a gathering of other things. I don't think that fits here. You see my
Yep.
point?
Yeah.
Because we want to here. I would like to, at least that's my opinion, and I might be wrong. That's the case as well. Where my thinking is here, this should be a comprehensive single solution where you can provide your driver and then have a multi-network end-to-end solution for this, right? Unless we are saying this is just temporary for now so that we can build stuff and move on with some other components, then why do we, if it's a temporary and if that's the case, even then why we need to put it here, right? That's my, unless it is fully in relation to this project, right? That's my problem with this, because you're
mean,
trying to create here a project, a controller that's not related to, not fully related to this multi-network effort. That's my problem.
yes, but the building blocks that will use the multi-network things will use
Okay,
this generic thing.
so what I'm saying is let's create another repo where the building block is there, and then I can import in multi-network repo all that building built so that I implement multi-network effort. You see my point, right here, Lionel? Because
I
otherwise,
see it. Yeah.
because this is one of the implementers, right? You say, Doug and Lionel, you saying, okay, let's create those other repositories. We will have other repositories pulling this. Multi-network is that repository as well, where it will pull and create its opinionated implementation based on pod network, resource claim, status, and the gateway API, I think, hopefully. But yeah, there's something to discuss, right? Gaurav.
Hey, sorry, I have a more basic question. I'm a bit new to this stuff, so it may be I may be lacking some context, but we are proposing a new endpoint slice library within Kubernetes 6. Like, how is it different from the one that is in Kubernetes? I think we want to be generic, but is it because we have tried to improve the existing one on Kubernetes / endpoint slice and we didn't get any permissions, which is why we want to fork it out?
I will give my opinion on this. Is number one, prior to this effort for multi-networking, Kubernetes doesn't acknowledge the existence of multiple networks, and this group couldn't succeed with a KEP to change the specification of Kubernetes in order to do that. That's one part. Another thing is, yes, while you can use endpoint slices in other ways, I think they're traditionally associated with services. So I have not seen core Kubernetes be open to making modifications to services. So actually, Lionel had tried previously to get this in through another effort and kept and was unable to. So having its own repository to be useful as a library, in my mind, would be progress that we could make forward without change to core Kubernetes. I would definitely love to hear other people's take on this, but that was a great question, and I think it's challenging to figure out. But personally, I see having a repository like this would be, one way to move forward and be able to answer this question for folks.
Dak, I think the other one more thing I can add to this is I know that your efforts, Lionel. Have you thought of, because there was an effort from Tomo, remember, from the networking plumbing working group, to add a label to or create a label on a service to say I manage it. Do nothing, I will manage that service. Having that is something that I think folks were open to do. I think what was missing when Tomo was driving is a fully fledged cap to do that. I think he created a CL. I don't think there was
I think he did have
He
a
did?
catch. Yeah, but yeah, Lionel kind of revived that. Maybe in the cap that he linked.
But
So
was
for
that because I think, Lionel, you were doing it because you were changing it too far? Maybe that was the case, because I think the initial idea was to, okay, I have the managed by flag. If it's there, I do not
you mean
nothing. That's it.
do you mean the label that disabled the punch size controller? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
the cap that I sent
oh,
in the
that
chat.
was the same, and that was
And
pushed back on.
yeah, and it was the original question that has been asked, is that yeah, this has been proposed already as part of the cap, and it got refused. So I removed. I mean, there was two parts of this cap. There was the generic endpoint slash controller that has been removed since, and there was this label that got refused because of Gateway API. So this generic endpoint slash controller, I did the work previously, and now I'm trying to push it somewhere, but I don't know where to push it now.
That's fair point, right? And okay, no, I hear you.
Okay, got it. So,
I think
sorry, Machi, one last question. So, we're saying that this new repository that we want to propose, or we are proposing within Kubernetes 6, that can in fact be generic enough that it's a replacement for the one in Kubernetes slash endpoint slice. Is my understanding correct?
It it could
Okay.
also for the mirroring controller, but I don't think people wants to do that. Just I'm saying that it could. I tried it
Okay.
and
Okay.
I
Got it.
tested it.
I see. Again, thanks for the context. I think I'll do some additional reading before asking more questions. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks
no
for the
worries,
question.
Turf.
No, it's a great question for sure.
Folks, I hope, getting back to putting this here, you see my point on this being a library here, because I'm considering. Are you agree with me, or I'm
I agree with you, and I will not push anything that is outside of the multi-network scope. I
right?
expect this to be, I mean, this generic part to be a new repo at some point. Just I of
So
course don't
I
want to
think,
push something that is completely unrelated to this.
right. Okay. So what I think what we are saying is, or maybe that's the solution. Let's have a multi-network specific controller, but write it in a way where it's pluggable. I think that's what you want to say. Is that true?
That's what I'm trying to do. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I think in that case, that's a fair point, right? And that's something that we I think I'm standing behind. Yeah. If we will do that, then yeah, that sounds good. What we would need though to do that is the design for this, right, Lionel? To what will that look like? Because keep in mind, I have some initial code for the for the pod network reconciler already somewhere in some right now. I didn't publish it because it's just bare bones, like from KubeBuilder generated the basic stuff, no logic in reconciler. But I am not pushing this I'm pushing this only on my fork, on my personal fork too, because this is where I'm going to play around. I don't want to push anything into this repo without a approved design. And I think we are all agreeing on that part. I don't want this, to come in and get out of hand. I want to make sure that there is a separate path for docs where we have all the designs and what's what, right? And that we know that it's approved on that front.
I can create. I think Shane was proposing a NEPT, multi-network enhancement proposal. I can create one for this work if you want.
Yeah, MNAP, okay. Map, meep, meep. Yeah. Yeah, something like it doesn't have to be yet in that form, but I think we need some sort of a design because right now we are still in the inception form, right? So we don't have any structure around this yet. We don't have anything to add to or change towards. So I don't think it has to be so official like a multi-network enhancement proposal yet, because we are not there yet
No.
for those.
Also,
But I definitely would like to have a proper design of what it is, what's the goal, how it's going to be explicitly done, all the details, and how we want to kind of position it and how that's going to look like in the repo. Okay,
but
Lionel, is that okay? Does that sound right?
then I'm not sure. Creating a net, then I mean, it's the design document is this enhancement proposal.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, then yeah, but yeah.
Or I mean, or if you mean something else, or I don't know.
No,
I'm
I
not
mean,
really
yeah, yeah.
Okay, I will try to do that then. Thanks.
Let's work on it. Let's review it, and then let's. I wonder. Do you think this is gonna introduce any new objects, APIs, or you want to use
No,
only on
it's
existing things?
just library. It will.
So it cannot be only library here, right? If you're introducing to this report, it has to be a control, one of the controllers. It cannot be just library. You can create a
Yeah,
library, but then you have to create a controller out of it here so that we can use it.
yeah. I mean, yeah, but there's no API. I mean, a controller. Just
I-
it's a bit hard also to do that now because
We don't have the
we
pieces.
don't have
Okay, I see
we don't
what
have
you're saying.
services also. So.
Yeah. Doug, you want to say something?
I was just gonna say, like, even it's like I don't think that we need to like artificially like insert this library into a controller when it could be its own library that could be useful in other places too. And there's no reason that we can't have a plan to implement it later, right?
Right.
Like I mean, we could
Oh,
have that as part of the design or whatever to say like this could be useful
yeah.
to other things, and we are hopeful to implement it once we get to milestone X or whatever, right?
Yeah, and that's yeah, exactly. So we can call out a bit hand waving around. Okay, when if we're gonna have this endpoint slice that's being talked here, and endpoint, not endpoint slice, endpoint selector, sorry, and then this whole gap, you can reference that's gonna get implemented in full. This is where we're gonna start implementing our stuff. For now, we're just gonna do this library, which is be very generic, pluggable, etc., and basically then have all the details about that part, right? About the library itself. I agree on that part. Keep in mind then, one thing with libraries is that this repository is going to generate controllers. It's going to have a bunch of code related to that, and then you want to have some library that you want to import into other repositories. Be wary of that, because then you have only one Go mod in the repository. I don't know, I would like to have two separate Go mods, because you can do that as well, so that you only import the subsection of that repo. Something that, unless there are some other ways, I'm not so this is the one ways I know about Golang can kind of import things around, unless there is some other ways, and as you have some better proposals, let's call them out in the design as well, because otherwise, though you want to import let's say this endpoint slice library, you are going to import the whole thing, including all the other things and other dependencies that you might get hurt by. So be wary of that or think about that part as well in your design, how to kind of do that. Okay. Let me write it down. I think that sounds right?
Yeah, it sounds good to me. Thanks.
All right. Any other topics? Maybe one thing I want to do in regards to the initial proposal that we have. I'm thinking of going to the DRA meeting. I think they are kind of canceled for the KubeCon, maybe not. I saw some notification from John, but basically I would like to go there and run that idea by them and see, is that on track? Is there a maybe better way on how we could integrate with DRA? Maybe they have some ideas and proposals. And this is going to the kind of aspect of us creating the resource claim template in every namespace. So that's something that I would like to kind of touch on if there's a somehow better way on that. Yeah, that's something that I'll let you know if when I'm gonna find a time to get there, go to that meeting, and so you can be there as well in the discussion.
Just so you're aware, there's two meetings. There's one on Tuesday and there is another one on Wednesday. The one on Wednesday is for Europe and Asia, and the other one is for North America and Europe.
They both at the morning, right? I see the Tuesday one is on 8 a.m. as well. Is EU friendly? Okay, that's the one. I think that's the most popular. Is that true?
Yeah.
No, that's the
Yes,
gateway
correct.
API. Sorry, no, that's not the one I care about. I'm looking
It's
at
at the same time, I think. It's at the same time as the API.
Yeah, I think that got maybe. Oh, this is the
It's-
workgroup device. Yeah, this is the
Next-
workgroup device.
Next week is on Tuesday, and this week it was on Wednesday.
Oh, gotcha. Oh yeah, it's next week, so maybe I can manage to get something in there. Let me try to maybe next week. Let's maybe do that then. Let me try to get it. There is get some input and get some of this on the agenda. March 12th, that was this week. Okay, so yeah, there is nothing. Okay, let me try to add ourselves to the agenda next week. So that's 18th. Okay. That's gonna be March, right? March 18th. That's 8:30 a.m. And this is you say this is the US based one?
Yes.
US
Europe,
friendly time.
yes.
Oh yeah, I see. Are we okay with this one, folks? Or you want me to, because oh, it's in the morning. Oh no, 1 a.m. Sorry, I won't maybe be able to do that. Apologies. I see. No, 1 a.m. it's no good. Is that good? Are you okay with going this, Lionel? I think.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, thanks. What I want to say, March. Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Anything else? Any other topics? If not, then thanks everyone, and let's meet hopefully at the workgroup device manager meeting. Bye everyone.
Catch you all soon. All right, bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.